Hello, and thank you for joining today's program, the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project Technical Assistance Webinar for Assisted Living Facilities. Welcome to members of the assisted living facility community in Rhode Island. This webinar is intended for assisted living facility staff members who have a role in emergency preparedness assessment, planning, and staff training. Whether your facility is confident in your response to an emergency, or whether you don't know where to begin, this webinar will present tools that will support your facility in continuously improving your response to an event that could impact your facility's utilities and require your facility to shelter in place. The tools that you will learn about today were developed as part of a statewide effort, the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project. This project is conducted by the Rhode Island Department of Health and supported with subject matter expertise from the Yale New Haven Health System Center for Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Response.
It doesn't rain like it used to.
It doesn't just rain anymore.
It's something that you will never, ever forget.
It's at the back of the facility here. We had about 10 feet of water.
Mother Nature is knocking on your front door.
It's here. Oh yeah. Sea level rises, we experience it.
It's not going away. After a big storm, the question is always rebuild or retreat.
I think the realities of living along the coast are it's a very dynamic system.
We saw all of the water sources that we would use for our water suppression for fire dry up.
As our population is getting older and our families are aging in place, it becomes ever increasingly important for housing authorities to start looking at preparedness in this way.
It's not a matter of will there be another superstorm or hurricane for our community. It's a matter of when.
As community leaders, it's one of the major concerns we have to talk about.
The information you receive today will assist you in utilizing the resources that are available to you through the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project. These resources include a self-assessment tool to evaluate your facility's energy resiliency and ability to shelter in place in the event of an emergency, a gap assessment planning process that guides facilities in addressing and prioritizing mitigation activities, a shelter-in-place plan template to facilitate development of formal planning efforts, and a staff training presentation that supports facilities in educating staff related to shelter in place. All of the tools presented today can be downloaded for facility use from the Rhode Island Department of Health's website. Navigate to the address listed here and then click on the Senior Resiliency Project link. The Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project was developed to assist long-term care facilities, assisted living residences, and independent senior housing facilities in your preparedness efforts in order to decrease the impact that severe weather can have on the vulnerable populations who you serve, your staff, and your facility. The first phase of the project included the development and refinement of tools specifically designed to meet the unique needs of long-term care facilities, assisted living residences, and independent senior housing facilities. These tools were designed, tested, and improved with a smaller pilot group of Rhode Island facilities, and now the tools are ready to be utilized by facilities statewide. After completion of today's webinar, learners will understand how to assess your facility regarding critical elements for energy resiliency and sheltering in place using a self-assessment tool specifically designed for long-term care facilities. Address the results of your self-assessment by writing a gap analysis report to document your facility's findings. Review a shelter-in-place plan template so you can compare your existing plan to an expertly developed plan, or write a new plan for your facility if needed. And finally, review staff training resources specifically tailored to the needs of long-term care facilities so you can improve current staff training or develop new resources if needed. We'll achieve these objectives through the following agenda. First, we'll introduce the Facility Emergency Preparedness Self-Assessment Tool. Second, the Facility Gap Assessment Process. Third, the Facility Template Plan for sheltering in place within the facility. And finally, resources for staff training. Along the way, we'll hear from a subject matter expert from the Yale New Haven Health System Center for Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Response. David Burek will provide real-world practical implementation assistance to help you and your staff get the most out of these tools and resources, protect your residents, staff, and facilities, and continue the important mission of your facility. David will start us off by defining some important terminology commonly used when discussing severe weather events that can impact a facility's utilities and prompt staff and patients to remain in the facility.
The first key concept to review for today's webinar is energy resiliency. Energy resiliency is having the resources needed to maintain a safe internal environment. While we might assume the municipal resources of electricity and natural gas will never fail, we know that is not true. Without pointing fingers or blaming people, simply recall the outcome at the Rehabilitation Center in Hollywood Hills in Florida. Hurricane Irma brought high winds that knocked out municipal power to the area. The facility did not have a generator to power their air conditioning, allowing the temperature inside the facility to rise, and 14 residents died as a result. Facilities need to have the ability to generate sufficient power to maintain all elements of life safety. This includes not just the fire suppression system and emergency lighting, but also other systems that may be needed to maintain the health of the residents and staff. In the case of the facility in Florida, this meant having adequate air conditioning. For a northern facility, heat might be required during a winter snowstorm. The second key term is shelter in place. Shelter in place refers to the ability of patients, staff, and possibly visitors to safely remain in the residence or facility. All the basic human needs must be provided, in some cases for several days without receiving additional supplies. Among the elements needed are shelter, food, water, heat and air conditioning, sanitation, lighting, medications and oxygen, and security.
Now that we've reviewed some important terminology, let's set the scene by thinking about our own experience at the facility where we work. No matter what the weather is today, imagine instead the impending arrival of a winter storm. Weather reports have been discussing the possibility for days, and today the reports state that it's inevitable. Up to 3 feet of snow statewide, freezing temperatures, blizzard-like conditions, and the possibility of high winds and ice that could impact utilities. The snow is falling fast, and phone calls have started to come in. Supply deliveries are postponed. Staff are making great efforts to report to work. Some staff are unable to report to work. Visitors have stopped arriving. Residents have hunkered down, and your facility is considering the days ahead. Take a moment to answer these questions. What plans do we have in place at my facility? Do we know how to activate our plans? What will our response be? Do we know how we'll prioritize our actions? Do staff know what their role is? What if utilities are impacted and we lose power? What if the situation wasn't a winter storm, but instead a flood? How would that change things at our facility? Let's begin to address these critical questions by introducing resources specifically designed for assisted living facilities like yours. The first resource is a self-assessment tool for assisted living facilities. The Facility Self-Assessment Tool can be downloaded for facility use from the Rhode Island Department of Health's website. Navigate to the address listed here and then click on the Senior Resiliency Project link. The Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project Facility Self-Assessment Tool is a Microsoft Excel resource that provides a menu for scripted answers to over 100 questions regarding an assisted living facility's ability to respond to a disaster that might impact utilities and require a facility to shelter in place. The tool guides users to examine multiple areas of their facility, including facility location and elevation, facility structure, utilities and resources, food and nutrition, clinical and non-clinical staffing and notification, alternate care, and resident and staff evacuation and movement. The tool guides your facility in assessing your current abilities so you can identify your areas of strength and focus on your vulnerabilities. Assessment questions regarding location and elevation of the facility include questions that consider the facility's elevation above sea level, approximate distance to coastal or river water, and isolation potential and surrounding area flooding potential. For many facilities, it is recommended that you generate a FEMA flood insurance rate map, abbreviated as FIRM, if the facility or your evacuation route is located in an area that might flood. Rural facilities that are located among the hills may want to obtain a topographic map to evaluate possible obstructions in your evacuation routes. Questions regarding structural concerns inquire about considerations such as window ratings, protection from exterior doors and barriers, floor and external drainage, and roofing construction, drainage, and equipment. Utilities and resources questions explore the water supply and its configuration, use, storage, and consumption for both human and mechanical uses. Regarding generators, questions explore the location, protection, age, and fuel supply. The municipal power supply configuration is considered, including whether it is above or below ground, the age and the history of failure and mitigation efforts from the municipality. The HVAC system is considered, including whether the system is connected to the emergency power supply and if windows can be opened for ventilation. Questions regarding food and nutrition explore potable water storage, on-site or vendor food services, food storage, conservation methods, and cooking systems. Regarding alternate care, questions consider alternate spaces, the possible uses of 1135 waivers, and other care considerations. Finally, regarding evacuation and movement, questions consider horizontal and vertical movement, elevators, evacuation devices and training, mutual aid, regional planning, and exercises. The results of your facility's self-assessment are only as reliable as the resources used to conduct the assessment. David, today's subject matter expert, offers some critical implementation tips for conducting your facility's self-assessment process.
When you conduct your facility self-assessment, take your time with each topic and be sure you have the right people around the table. Involve your emergency preparedness committee. If you encounter a question for which you need input from a staff person not involved in the process, take the time to pull the needed resource in and never make assumptions. In this way, you'll get an accurate answer to each assessment question and a true picture of your facility's strengths and vulnerabilities. In our experience helping facilities with their assessments, we've found that many questions on the self-assessments are not answered correctly. Administrators and facility engineers may not know the wind rating of their windows, the structure of the roof, exactly what is energized by the generator, or how long the generator will run without refueling, how long it would take to evacuate the facility in an acute emergency, or how much water is used each day and for what. Facilities are complex and change over time, so make sure you are utilizing correct current information as you assess your facility. Accurate assessments lead to accurate plans. Also remember that there are no right or wrong answers. Even if an answer reveals a facility vulnerability, identifying the vulnerability is the first step in planning to mitigate the vulnerability and strengthen your facility's resiliency.
As you conduct your own facility self-assessment, remember to learn from your facility's past experiences, and also from the experience of the Rhode Island facilities who have already participated in the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project pilot.
Several vulnerabilities were discovered during the self-assessments conducted at the pilot sites. Common findings included lack of stored potable water, generators with insufficient output capability, fuel for generators that might only last 1 or 2 days, and a lack of devices and training for emergent evacuations. Pay particular attention to these common problem areas when you conduct your own facility assessment. Also reflect on your facility's experiences during past drills and actual responses to climate-related situations. The lessons learned from past emergency responses will help inform your assessment and improve your planning.
Once strengths and vulnerabilities are highlighted through the self-assessment process, plan to build upon strengths and address vulnerabilities through the development of a gap assessment. To conduct a gap assessment, your facility does not need a template or tool, but instead can refer to the following process. Start with your facility self-assessment and summarize the assessment results in another document, developing 2 sections. One section that states your facility's strengths and another section that states your facility's challenges. Then develop a list of options to consider to address your vulnerabilities. Share your gap assessment document with your leadership team to help your facility determine the way forward. Look for the low-hanging fruit, or opportunities where a vulnerability can be quickly, easily, or affordably addressed, as well as looking for long-term projects that might require complex planning, a large budget, and an extensive timeline. Your facility can prioritize actions based upon all of these important factors. If you need assistance in how to address vulnerabilities identified in the assessment process, consider seeking support from other facilities within your coalition, your local emergency planning committee, an appropriate department within the Rhode Island state government, or a reputable consultant. As you develop your gap assessment plan, David reminds facilities to be as critical as possible.
Don't overstate your facility's strengths during the gap assessment process. The areas you identify as challenges will be areas where your planning and mitigation efforts are focused, so be as realistic as possible to direct your efforts where they need to go. There is a spectrum of efforts that can be identified to address most vulnerabilities, ranging from policy and procedure development to complex, expensive, and timely facility modifications. Any effort along the mitigation spectrum will move your facility forward in increasing preparedness, but your vulnerabilities must first be identified.
Let's now move from assessment to taking action to increase your facility's preparedness level, specifically through planning. In considering your facility's ability to respond to an event which may impact utilities and prompt residents and staff to remain in the facility, a critical component of your facility's response is referring to your facility's formal plan to shelter in place. This next section of the webinar will present a template of a shelter-in-place plan specifically developed to meet the unique needs of assisted living facilities. Your facility can utilize the template plan if you do not currently have a shelter-in-place plan, or you can compare your existing plan to the template to continuously improve your plan. The shelter-in-place plan template can be downloaded for facility use from the Rhode Island Department of Health's website. Navigate to the address listed here and then click on the Senior Resiliency Project link. As you proceed, consider some basic tenets of shelter-in-place planning.
The purpose of your facility's shelter-in-place plan is to describe systems and processes by which the facility will maintain operations prior to, during, and after disaster that involves residents and staff remaining at the facility. A shelter-in-place plan is specific in scope only to incidents when the residents will be remaining in the facility. It does not replace existing plans or policies, but provides a ready reference of existing information for staff. Like all other policies, procedures, and plans, the shelter-in-place plan should be reviewed and updated at least annually by leadership.
As your facility develops or revises its shelter-in-place plan, review the template plan developed through the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project and ensure the plan covers the following critical areas. Authorities and responsibilities, including how and when the plan is activated, the configuration of the emergency management team, and command and control. Another consideration is documenting who has the authority to make decisions when the senior leadership is unavailable. For example, if severe weather has knocked out communications and made the roads impassable, can the off-shift supervisor contract with a local supplier of meals or groceries? A description of the facility includes number of buildings, population housed, number of staff, and sheltering requirements. A description of utilities and resources, including emergency power generation, nutrition and hydration resources, ventilation and air conditioning contingencies, supply levels and overstocking options, and waste management processes. Food and nutrition processes, including alternate methods for meal preparation, identification of primary and backup food vendors, how many days' worth of food is stored, and how many additional days of food could be stored in advance of a disaster. Also consider your supply of enteral feeding resources. Potable water supply information should include the currently stored supply and where you can obtain additional water in advance of the event if possible. Remember that you should be able to provide about 1 gallon of potable water per person for up to 4 days. If you are not storing this much water, when will you be ordering it, and where will you store the water? Along with water supplies, you need to consider other needs for water, such as sanitation. You certainly don't want to be dumping bottles of drinking water into the toilets. What other methods for sanitation are available at your facility if you lose municipal water supply? Consider using your shower chairs and bedside commodes. Line a box or trash can with a plastic garbage bag, then add several inches of clumping cat litter to the box. Place the box below the shower chair. It is more sanitary to scoop up clumps of litter from a box than having a toilet bowl full of waste. Clinical and staffing information should include defining the level of care that will be provided. In an emergency, this might require adapting your normal staffing ratios or utilizing agreements with other agencies to share staff. Also consider that in an emergency, your facility may need to shelter staff. Where will they be housed? Do your food and water calculations include staff? If a staff person indicates they cannot report to work because they must care for their children or elderly parents, does your facility have written plans that allow them to bring their dependents with them? What about their pets? Evacuation and movement information is also included. Although separate from shelter in place, evacuation and movement is inherently tied to shelter in place due to the unpredictable nature of disasters. A shelter-in-place situation may unexpectedly turn into an evacuation situation. Therefore, the shelter-in-place plan identifies what triggers or tipping points have been identified that might necessitate a partial or full evacuation, and what mechanisms are in place to assist with the evacuation. Additional tools and resources may be included in the plan, such as personal preparedness checklists for staff, residents, and residents' families, pre-storm facility checklists, and hoteling rosters. Our subject matter expert, David, reminds us that developing or revising your plan should not just be a process of checking off a box as being complete, but the planning and revision process will help a facility during an actual response.
Annual plan review should involve tasks such as assembling your emergency preparedness committee, communicating with leadership, updating staff, educating residents and resident families, reflecting on facility and area changes, contacting suppliers, vendors, and partners, and other preparedness-related actions. These steps not only result in a policy that is current, but also strengthen your facility's emergency response in important ways, such as communicating and networking. Comparing your facility's shelter-in-place plan with a template tool can result in a stronger, more robust plan and a stronger, more responsive team. In the emergency preparedness field, it's not just the plan that benefits a facility, it's also the planning process.
Now let's look at one final resource developed by the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project. The staff training material provided was developed to meet the specific needs of assisted living facilities in the event utilities are impacted or the facility needs to shelter in place. This training was designed to support your facility in effectively communicating your preparedness program with your staff. The staff training template can be downloaded for facility use from the Rhode Island Department of Health's website. Navigate to the address listed here and then click on the Senior Resiliency Project link. The Shelter-in-Place training is a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation designed specifically to meet the needs of long-term care, assisted living, and independent senior living facilities. The slide set can be modified to meet the unique needs of your facility and shelter-in-place plan. Key topics include emergency management configuration, utilities and resources, food and nutrition, clinical and staffing concerns, and evacuation and movement. An important objective of staff training is for staff to understand their specific role in the event of a situation that prompts the facility to shelter in place. To achieve this objective, facility-wide training, such as the one provided here, should be coupled with job-specific training as needed, conducted for staff members by their individual department or supervisor. David reminds us to work towards supporting staff in meaningful learning as you educate your staff on the facility's shelter-in-place plan.
Adults learn best when they understand the importance of the material they are learning, how it applies directly to them and their job responsibilities, and are able to contribute their experience and expertise to learning. When you present your shelter-in-place plan to your staff, present the big picture by outlining the plan as a whole, but then be sure to highlight each individual staff member's role in the shelter-in-place plan. Bring it home by highlighting events at your facility that required you to shelter in place, and ask staff to chime in with their experience regarding how they best supported a response. Facilities can also encourage staff to consider their own personal and family preparedness efforts. This will not only engage staff in the learning process, but will also result in staff who are more likely to report to work in the midst of an emergency event.
We've discussed the 4 resources outlined on today's agenda, so let's conclude the webinar with one additional tip from David.
As your facility works with the tools and information provided by the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project, remember that emergency preparedness is an ongoing cyclical process. The tools from the project are just one slice of the larger pie that is your facility's overall emergency preparedness program. Today's tools enhance and not replace the other parts of your comprehensive emergency preparedness program. All emergency preparedness work starts with the assessment of your emergency preparedness program, leads to planning, and then moves on to implementation activities such as staff training and follows up with drills and exercises. Once the cycle is completed, it is conducted again and again to continually enhance the overall preparedness level of your facility. Critical processes in this cycle include an annual review of the facility's hazard vulnerability analysis, regular review of the emergency management policies and procedures, drills to test your program, and education for your staff, residents, and families of residents. Your facility must continue to move along the continuum of emergency preparedness using resources such as the unique tools presented today to help your facility to continuously improve the level of emergency preparedness.
If you have additional questions about any of the tools presented today or about the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project, please contact the Climate Change Program at the Rhode Island Department of Health. We look forward to learning about the progress your facility will make as you forge ahead in the emergency preparedness process and how the Rhode Island Senior Resiliency Project can support you and your facility along the way. Thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar and the Senior Resiliency Project. On behalf of the Rhode Island Department of Health, and also on behalf of Rhode Island Assisted Living residents and their families, thank you for all you do each day to protect the health and safety of the residents of Rhode Island.